This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Bagley.
Snow and ice aside, half the battle of a frigid winter is simply keeping warm. It's one thing to toss on a jacket and dash to and from your car. It's another if you're outside for hours. We go inside outdoors with Scott Newsome, and what works for him in high altitudes also works for us in a fishing boat, a tree stand, sled riding, at a football game. And I'd say by the end of the show, Mr. Jack Frost will have met his match. Next on Kentucky Afield Radio.
Boys were in trouble. About 10 seconds later, he said, boys were going down.
A true story.
And it sunk right out from under us.
20 degrees.
Within seconds, one boating trip went
straight down.
The water was bone-chilling.
Once you hit that water, it's so cold you can't move.
The human body wasn't designed for this.
It took my breath away as soon as I hit it, and my hands were so cold in a matter of seconds that I couldn't pop the clip on my waders to get them off.
Conditions were so bad it's amazing that anybody survived.
Perfect for duck hunting, but not for a swim in the middle of a river.
Going overboard is never the thought.
You have to think ahead.
Fun can turn frantic in seconds.
There's no time to react when your world just sinks out from under you.
3 hunters, 2 survivors, 1 reason.
Your life jacket's got your back.
Make sure your first mate isn't your last.
I really don't think that I could have made it without a life jacket.
Your Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife reminds you, your life jacket's got your back, and the backing of sportsmen on winter water everywhere. Living in Kentucky, we have experience with cold weather here. Bone-chilling cold. How cold is it? It is so cold that our mothers will say, stay inside or you will catch your death in cold. Not true, necessarily. If you dress properly, honestly, you will not notice the cold. Scott Newsome, he knows a little bit about this. He is the general manager of Quest Outdoors in Louisville. But beyond that, he loves winter sports, trout fishing, a mountain climber who has summited Mount Rainier in Washington State, cross-country skier. He loves prolonged outdoor winter activities. He invited me to his shop to talk about dressing to stay warm in winter, to take a first-hand look at what works and what doesn't, and why.
Well, gosh, my biggest challenge to stay warm, I think, was probably on a backcountry ski trip in Colorado, the 10th Mountain Trail. And I remember just hitting a point of being borderline hypothermic, getting to the cabin and warming up, and it was just such a relief.
Well, Scott, you bring up a point, because anybody who's doing anything outdoors, if it's waterfowl hunting or hiking to a tree stand or snow skiing, sled riding, this is kids too, this is women anywhere. If you're putting out energy, chances are you're putting out perspiration. And I don't know how you survived in Colorado, because I know your body was just pumping out the moisture.
And everything that I was wearing, they were all synthetics. They will wick moisture away, from your body to take the chill off. They move it to the outside of the fabric so that it will evaporate.
That key word was wick, W-I-C-K. The cloth is absorbing that perspiration so that it will air dry. Now, a cotton T-shirt's not going to do that?
No, a cotton T-shirt, the term there, we say it's hydrophilic. It works like a sponge. It is going to soak up your perspiration, but it's going to hold it in those fibers. And like on a hot summer day, if you've got on a cotton shirt, it'll just be soaking wet. That's why you see a lot of performance-type athletes, football players, basketball players, they're all wearing synthetic fibers because they know that they will wick the moisture away from their body, and they'll move it to the outside of the fabric, keeping them dry.
A brand name or two, Under Armour would be one of those, a dry fit?
That's true. That's a line. The line that we carry here that you're going to find a product from a company called Patagonia. It's Capilene. In the old days, they used a lot of polypropylene. A problem with polypropylene fibers is they held body odor. You may use it one time. The next day, you're out at the hunting lodge and you go to grab your old polypropylene, or you could hardly bear the smell. It stunk so bad.
Yeah, here we're going to do nearly an hour on this program talking about staying warm, and somebody's going to think, Baglin, it's just not that big a deal. You put on a coat. It's one thing to get out of the car on a cold winter's day and dash indoors or dash to the grocery store and come back out, get back in a warm car. Next thing you know, the heater's on, and so you're okay. So you don't really need much. I'm thinking at the kid, let's say in late October at a football game, and it's chilly. It may be 50 or 45 degrees. He's wearing a T-shirt. I know he's cold. Is it a mental thing? Can you will yourself to be warm?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, there's just a physical limit of what you can take. But if you are out in a deer stand, or if you're out on one of our wonderful lakes, and if it's a cold fall day, or maybe a lot of people fish year-round here, and if you're out on that water, you may be some distance from your vehicle, and if all you've got's an old cotton work coat, you're putting yourself at a certain amount of risk. Anybody in today's world, if you're a mountaineer, if you're a skier, if you're a hunter, if you're a fisherman, it is not in your best interest to purchase old technology. You want to go with new technology. You want to go with synthetic fibers in your garments that are going to keep you dry and they're going to keep you warm.
For the most people, if they want to stay warm, they'll put on a coat. They may or may not zip it up. But if they really want to go out and stay for a while, let's just say it's something as simple as going out sled riding for 2.5 solid hours. That coat that you didn't zip isn't going to work. A lot of times winter garments, and I hesitate to call them winter because they're made of cotton. Tell me the pros and cons of the fabric of our life.
We're comfortable in the cotton here. We're here working. We're in the shop. Cotton's fine for that. But when you get out into the wilderness, the cotton fibers, as I'd mentioned earlier, they're what we call hydrophilic. They fill up like a sponge. They will keep that moisture next to your body, whereas synthetic fibers, polyester-type fibers, will wick that moisture away from you and move it to the outside, and therefore keep you drier. The other product that is making an incredible resurgence, and it's what everybody wore up until, the 1960s, say, were wool fibers. These days, there are larger herds of merino wool sheep. Most of that comes out of New Zealand. They are very fine fibers of wool that don't have the larger barbs on there that make it itchy, so you can wear it right next to the skin. And wool will do the same thing as your synthetic fibers. It will wick the moisture away from your body, move it to the outside of the fabric, and keep you dry. I really like the wool products these days.
To finish up on cotton, when it gets wet, it doesn't dry very quickly.
No, and that's the key right there with what you just said. When it gets wet, that's when cotton becomes ineffective.
Well, people may be saying, well, I'm not going to get it wet. It's winter. I don't sweat in the winter.
Oh,
but you do.
You do.
Or let's say you fall out of a boat or you get rained on. Then you are wet, and it's not going to dry quickly, but you're saying wool will keep you warm when it's wet. You'll be better off wearing wool if you get wet. Goose down.
It's one of the very best. In very, very cold weather, I love having a goose down jacket. All my sleeping bags that I own for fall, spring, or winter use, they are all goose down. A lot of people will, say, but when it gets wet, it loses its capacity to insulate. And that's because it compacts and compresses. It has no thickness to it. Charlie, I've been doing these activities for 45 years. I can count on one hand the times I've gotten my sleeping bag wet. It's paramount to keep yourself dry. The advantage with goose down is its weight to warmth ratio. It is super lightweight. And if it is in a material that is not waterproof, if it gets wet, it could lose its insulating power. I get people they come into the store all the time, and they want a jacket or they want a glove. I want it really, really warm, but I want it real thin. There are products that are warmer being thin, but the bottom line is insulation. The amount of loft that you have in there is the true measure of keeping you warm. It's just like the insulation you might put in at the attic in your home. Owens Corning with their pink, they will give you an R factor rating. And that R factor rating has to do with how thick it is. Our products that we sell here have R factor ratings too, a lot of times. The more insulation you have above you or around you, the warmer you're going to be.
We're talking to Scott Newsome, outdoorsman, mountain climber, a man who is no stranger to winter cold, and how to dress to avoid the cold. He's done the experimenting, so we don't have to. After the break, we will lay out the facts on layering. My name is Charlie Baglin, and this is Kentucky Afield Radio. Kentucky Afield Radio, this is Charlie Baglin. A warm coat, a warm sleeping bag, warm gloves. We talk about inanimate objects as if they are something that will generate heat and keep us warm. It doesn't work that way. What generates heat is our bodies. What coats and scarves and earmuffs and everything else does is keeps that warmth around you, and likewise keeps cold air from getting in. In effect, you're like a little microcosm of climate trekking through the snow. The types of fabrics that do this best and do this worst are what we're looking at today with Scott Newsome, outdoorsman and manager with Quest Outdoors. You may hear some customers in the background because this is a recorded interview we did recently at his shop in Louisville.
So one of the biggest mistakes, according to my research, that you can make, and this is from experience too, is to dress too warmly. I mean, you just pile stuff on. You generate heat in your body. Next thing you know, you're sweating. And then you need to get this sweat dried out. So the answer to that, I'm thinking history has proven, is layering.
Exactly.
I had talked a while ago, well, if you're cold, put on a coat. Well, that's layer 3, if you want to look at it technically. But layer 1 is right next to your skin. Explain what is meant by layering.
That very first layer is what's going to stay on us all the time. In this case, we're looking at Patagonia Capeline. This is Cap 1, or what a lot of us refer to as a silk weight.
So we're looking at this blue shirt here, and this would be worn right against the skin. This is going to fit you snugly, isn't it?
It's going to fit nice and snug, and it's one of the lightest products that they have out there. It's very comfortable.
So what you wear next to your skin, you want a snug fit.
You do. The performance is going to be a lot better. You don't want it tight, but snug. I always suggest nice and snug, form-fitting. It's touching all the areas of your body, and with that kind of a fit, you have the best opportunity to pull moisture away.
And I'm going to say again, check the tag inside the clothing, and if it says cotton anywhere on it, then choose something else.
For your first layer, yes. In this case, this product is 100% polyester. Now, at times, you might see, like in a pair of socks, and your socks are going to be right next to your skin too, obviously. You might see that in a sock that it is 70 or 75% wool, and then there may be spandex in there. There may be nylon in there. And the reason you have that spandex or nylon in there is the spandex gives it a nice snug fit. It pulls it in. That's going to be like a rubber band or around your waistband of your pants. And then the nylon's in there to help with the durability. Socks, you want to make sure that you have a high count of wool or synthetic fibers like polyester in that mix. Most of the products that we have out here today are all going to be pretty much 100% polyester in the material.
So that's layer number 1, from socks all the way up your legs, around your waist, and your shirt, down your sleeves, 100% polyester, no cotton against your skin to wick away any moisture that may arise from sweating.
That's true.
So that's layer 1. Now, how many layers are there? I'm guessing 3.
There could be any number. I would say most people that go into the outdoors have 3 to 4. And the other thing is, what areas of our body are we putting the layers on? When we look at losing body heat, there's two main areas that we really want to maintain that core temperature. One's in our torso. What many consider the most important is our head. So to make sure we keep the heat in, we want to have something on top of our head.
So people, when they go out without a hat on, are losing heat out the top of their head?
A lot of heat.
What if you have thick hair?
They're still losing a lot of heat, because that hair's just pulling it out also. It's wicking it out and moving that moisture out, and it gets to the outside of your hair, and sometimes it freezes up. And we're not a sheep; it's not going to keep us much warmer. But having a hat on is paramount. Again, you may be hiking, you may be biking, you may be hunting, skiing, you may be going to a football game, you may be playing a winter round of golf in the state of Kentucky. You want to look at your forecast for the duration of the time you're going to be out there. And if that means I'm going to be out there from sunup to sundown, look and see what the extremes are going to be, for that period. If you're going to be out for multiple days, then you want to have a collection of multiple layers to fit the particular situation. So layering is like a cake.
So we've established now layer 1. Layer 2. What does layer 2 need to be comprised of?
Layer 2, on a winter day, we might want to look at our base layer. Our first layer that we have on is what we call lightweight or silk weight. Your next layer that would go over that is what we call Cap 4 or Capeline 4. And it is a thicker, if you look at these two products and you feel the hand on this T-shirt, and then you feel this, you can just feel the flat out thickness.
It is thicker.
Right. And again, what I'd said earlier, insulation, thickness
R factor.
Is the R factor. The thicker the product, typically the warmer. It's not the only way to do it, but the more insulation you have in there, the warmer it's going to be.
Do you need to look like the Michelin Man to stay warm?
In some conditions, you may very well. I mean, if you're talking about sub-zero kind of conditions, a mountaineering condition. I've summited Mount Rainier, and Mount Rainier is a training ground for a lot of the high peaks around the world, and there's a reason for that. It's a steep climb. It's a lot of vertical climbing, and it's a very cold environment. You can be there in July. You can be in there in September. You can have 30, 40 degree days, and you can have days that are 20 degrees below. And on those climbs, the minute you stop climbing, typically you have that big, thick goose-down jacket. You referred to the Michelin Man. Well, you have to pull that jacket out. And if we stop, we're going to stop for 15 or 20 minutes. We're going to take a little break to try to recoup, get a little rest in. But we don't want to lose our core temperature. We don't want our body to start cooling down. So we're going to put that big, heavy expedition type parka on. Once we start to climb again, we're going to take that jacket off. We're going to throw it back in our backpack because we're going to be producing a lot of heat.
So layer number 2 needs to be a little thicker, have a little R value, so that it will hold the heat, trap it in the fibers, just like insulation in your attic.
What you've got on is one of my favorite layers, a synthetic-based or a wool-based vest. I love a vest. It gives me freedom of movement, but it insulates my core, my torso. And that, as I said earlier, that's one of your key areas that you've got to maintain that body heat.
Let's say you have your wicking layer on against your skin. You have something that's going to hold that heat in, and then on the outside there's going to be what we'll call a shell to keep the cold from getting in and the warmth from getting out. But I'm still looking here at the middle layer. What are some of the good you might already have in your closet that will help keep you warm as that center layer?
Well, like an old wool sweater would be excellent. Again, we want to stay away from the cotton. The preferred would be a Polartec fleece jacket. It could be a very light down sweater. Any of those would be excellent to have.
This is thermodynamics. You can get a degree in this in MIT.
Yeah.
Can we move on to the outer layer?
Oh, yeah.
What's important about an outer layer? And then that's that jacket you put on because you want to stay warm, and actually that's the third thing you should put on.
The outside layer typically is pretty thin. It needs to be of some kind of waterproof, breathable laminate. The name that a lot of people hear would be Gore-Tex, and that is a waterproof but breathable laminate that allows the moisture from your body, all the layers you're wearing, to move out to the outside of the parka, keeping you dry. Water molecules, as far as rain and as far as snow, they are too large to get through that laminate. The vapor that's going out, that your body's putting off as perspiration, is like steam. So it's more of a water vapor instead of a large droplet of water that's trying to get through. And that outside layer will be so important to keeping you dry.
This is Staying Warm 101. We're talking with winter trout fisherman, backpacker, mountaineer Scott Newsome. You know, I recall when I was a kid in my Boy Scout kit, there was this emergency blanket. It was a little thin plastic, film-like, crinkly thing. But it worked. More about the importance of outer layers, something we call coats. Plus mittens versus gloves in the battle for winter warmth. But our show continues. My name is Charlie Baglin, and you're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Charlie Baglin back on Kentucky Afield Radio. Warmth. It is not about vanity. When you are cold, forget about fashion. Think about function. If you're worried about the tough guy image, well, you can only fake it to a point. Then, the winter weather is going to win. Personally, I would rather be warm than pretty any day of the week. Polyester isn't a word exclusive to women's wear, or those ugly suits that guys used to wear in the later 70s during the disco craze. Polyester has evolved. Wool does not itch. Men and boys do wear mittens. They do wear earmuffs. If you have a hang-up about some of these things, then you may be shivering while everyone else is having fun. You can look good and stay warm at the same time, and that's part of what this program is about. But more than anything, it's letting you keep the warmth that your body is generating around you and keeping old man winter from getting in through the cracks. And what about hypothermia? Will it ever happen to you, or is that just one of those words you hear that happens to somebody else? Ice fishermen. There are a couple different kinds, like the sudden onset. That's come from cold water exposure, or the long onset, which is more about what this program is about, of exposure to cold temperature over time. What leads to hypothermia, and that's just your core body temperature falls below where it should be. Cold temperatures, improper clothing and equipment, wetness, fatigue, exhaustion, dehydration, poor food intake. In fact, if your body temperature is below 98.6, that can be a sign of hypothermia. How do you really know if someone is hypothermic? Let me introduce you to the umbles. Watch for these signs: stumbles, mumbles, fumbles, grumbles. If someone is stumbling around, not sure of their step, they can't speak clearly, they're mumbling their words, something they should be able to grab, a walking stick, for example, and they can't really hold tight to it. They're upset, they're aggravated. These are the umbles. Stumbles, mumbles, fumbles, grumbles. This person needs to warm up. 3 other quick things. Sunglasses. Really? In winter? Absolutely. You don't want to look at bright snow when it's sunny. It's blinding. How about a leather jacket? Is that warm? Yes, it is, if it's not very cold to begin with, or if it is lined with wool or some other insulation inside the leather coat. But don't be hanging your hopes on leather alone. Corduroy? Don't be fooled by the weave. Just because someone is skilled at a mill, take cotton and make it look warm, it's still a mid-level insulator at best. And even then, hope it's not very cold to begin with. But back to corduroy. If you can find it made of wool, polyester, or acrylic, you're far better off. We will be back with our guest Scott Newsome on winning the war with winter dressing to stay warm after the break. Here's a Christmas list that's not really so hard. In fact, you can do it on the road in your car. First, that old standby. Buckle up tight. That'll save you most quickly on a cold winter's night. Another big do is do some thinking. Drive if you're singing, but not if you're drinking. There's no gift like joy. We should all be so lucky. And it's yours, just as sure as you drive wise, Kentucky. A holiday wish for safe travels from your Kentucky office of Highway Safety. Back to the program. This is Charlie Baglin in with our outdoor expert, Scott Newsome. Scott manages a successful business in Louisville that's called Quest Outdoors. The point, though, isn't to make a sale, but rather to let you know how to dress to stay warm if you are outside in frigid conditions for any prolonged length of time. Might be winter camping, backpacking, waterfowl hunting, fishing, snow skiing, hiking, building a snowman, or even if you're a kid sled riding, listen up. Our goal is to not let the winter win. A lot of people have that very same idea, and they are likely the customers you hear milling about in the background, where we recorded this show at his store in Louisville.
What's important about an outer layer? And then that's that jacket you put on because you want to stay warm, and actually that's the third thing you should put on.
The outside layer typically is pretty thin. It needs to be of some kind of waterproof, breathable laminate. The name that a lot of people hear would be Gore-Tex, and that is a waterproof but breathable laminate that allows the moisture from your body, all the layers you're wearing, to move out through that Gore-Tex to the outside of the parka, keeping you dry. Water molecules, as far as rain and as far as snow, they are too large to get through that laminate. The vapor that's going out, that your body's putting off as perspiration, is like steam. So it's more of a water vapor instead of a large droplet of water that's trying to get through. And that outside layer is so important to keeping you dry.
Well, let's say you have just your regular nylon windbreaker. Is that one good? Is a raincoat good?
You started off with nylon, like a windbreaker. If your only concern that day is to keep the wind out, then it would be fine. Because wind is a definite factor in how warm you stay. If you're expecting any kind of inclement weather, then you've got to have something that's also going to keep you dry. You can't just have, windproof. The products that we've got here right now are base layers. If you put your hand up and blow through these, you can feel that wind go right through there.
You can.
So you've got to have something that keeps that wind from going on through.
Well, I've seen people outdoors trying to stay warm, and they're wearing garbage bags. Is there a message there?
I think the message there with a garbage bag is the person was pretty much unprepared to to begin with. However, at things like the mini marathon, you'll see garbage bags on a rainy mini marathon day, and they are there by design because a garbage bag is waterproof, but that also means that it's not going to breathe very well. So all that perspiration that the runner is having is staying inside that bag. So you're going to be soaking wet inside that bag.
You are, yeah. That's true.
So you're going to be cold. If you're just sitting still, if we walked out and sat on the stoop and it started raining and we had no physical activity and we decided to put a garbage bag on, we're pretty much going to stay dry. But the minute you start exerting any effort, you're going to get pretty wet. And even if you're not, your body's always perspiring. You may not notice it, but it always is.
We've talked about our bodies in general, but extremities. Let's say your nose, your ears, fingers, toes.
If your core temperature plummets and you go into a hypothermic state. But the things that I think we see in print, photographs, in movies, pictures, you see people that lose their extremities. They lose toes. You see mountaineers that have been caught in a bad situation. They end up with frostbite. And along with that, you can get the gangrene that, kills your body tissues. And you're going to find people, they lose their fingers. They lose their fingertips or their toes. And that's a pretty bad situation. As far as things like ears and nose, yeah, people have had frostbite and have had, terrible damage to their face.
So let's talk about those other pieces of clothes you need to wear. Let's just start with your hands, mittens or gloves.
I've always been of the belief that with a mitten would be the warmest because your fingers are touching each other. They're not being separated by any kind of a material like in a glove situation. So they're in there keeping each other comfortable, so to speak. So mittens, I feel, can be very warm. Plus, you can manufacture a mitten to be very thick. And again, the thickness is going to help determine how warm something is. Again, most of your really quality gloves are going to, and mittens, will be Gore-Tex based on the outside, so it's going to keep you dry. Or if your hands are perspiring a lot, the moisture is going to evaporate out through that glove, keeping your hand dry and keeping it warm. And then with a glove, you get the dexterity. Hand warmers, both disposable and reusable type hand warmers. We sell tons of them. I see more people use them probably going to, outdoor events like a fall football game, or they're going on a ski trip. And a lot of people will take that hand warmer and they will put it in the palm of their hand, where in effect, if you turn your hand upside down, you see all the veins going into your hand.
Put it on the back of your hand.
Put it on the back side. You don't have to get it down by your fingers. If you can keep your blood flow warm and going out to your fingers, you have a better chance of keeping everything warm. Plus, you don't have the bulk in the palm of your hand.
What do you look for in a glove that is really going to keep you warm if it's chilly outside?
Most of my gloves that I use in really cold temperatures really consist of two gloves. There's kind of an inner liner glove that is rather thin, like a sock, and then there's an outer glove. That combination works really well for me. I like the advantage of if I've got to take a glove off to maybe operate a camera, I can always keep that liner glove on. And that gives me a certain core warmth to my hand. It keeps the elements away. But a mitten would be the warmest.
Keeping your ears warm. Well, earmuffs do the job?
Earmuffs can work. Earmuffs might work very well for maybe a runner. They're really sweating a lot. They may be out there on a 15 or a 20 degree day, and they may be sweating a lot, and a lot of moisture is going out, out the top of their head, and they're glad to get rid of it. They don't want to be soaking wet, but their ears need something around them. And just a simple ear muff or a headband may work well. Most people do prefer some kind of a cap, and that cap could be made, again, from these synthetic fibers or some of the wool fibers.
If you want to keep your nose warm, how do you do that? Wrap a muffler around your face or what?
You can use a scarf to go around. For many years, I'd just use an old scarf wrapped around my face. But now we have what are called neck gaiters. And it's an open-ended sleeve that goes over your top of your head. Most people will bunch it up around their neck. Looks like a turtleneck. But when they need it, they can pull it up to their glasses or their goggles, up around their nose, over their mouth, and it keeps them very warm.
I've seen those, and they do work. Eye protection. And talking about eye protection, skin protection, doesn't necessarily keep you warm, but it'll keep you from burning. Do you wear skin block, sunblock in the winter?
I do. I mean, who ever thought the sun would be our enemy? And everybody's tolerance to to the sun is different. Fair skin, dark skin, it's paramount that you use some kind of a sunscreen. And just like you said a minute ago, Charlie, I'm the same way. I may go out for a casual Sunday golf game with my buddies, and it may be 40 degrees out, bright sunshine, and I come home redder than a beet. And that's from a couple things. Some of it can be from the wind, and the other is exposure to the sun. We don't spend as much time out in the winter. A lot of us lose that little tanning that we had, throughout the year that helps to, protect our skin to some extent. But yes, absolutely, wear some kind of a sunblock.
All right, we've talked about clothes. Let's talk about what you can put inside your body to help you stay warm on a cold winter's day. How about what you eat, what you drink, caffeine, bourbon?
If you go out and you just jump out on an empty stomach, you won't be as warm as when your body is getting fuel. You have a nice breakfast, you have a nice lunch, your body is burning up that intake that you just had.
So
it's producing heat.
You need
It's going to keep you warm. It's giving you energy.
Carbohydrates, or do you need steak? Which one of those?
Well, the carbohydrates for sure. You find a lot of high-performance electrolytes these days that work well with a summertime endurance athlete, maybe a runner, a bicycler, maybe somebody going on a long hike. The same thing is true with somebody that's going hunting for the day. They may be covering a lot of ground and going up and down. They need those same kind of products that make sure that you don't dehydrate. You don't want your body to lose so much moisture that it won't function properly. A cup of coffee might taste great. A little bit of whiskey, and it may taste great, and it may give you a certain amount of warmth as a feeling. Same with the coffee. But will it last? No, it won't. They both can dehydrate you. And in the form of alcohol, it can disorient you. So you really want to be careful on using both of those.
So you're saying cold water to keep you warm is better than hot coffee?
Yeah, cold water, if you can keep your water bottle from freezing up, keeping you hydrated is really important.
And that's good winter or summer?
Winter or summer.
Scott, I've learned a lot from you. Thanks,
Charlie, thank you.
You bet.
Okay.
I like that guy. He talks the talk, walks the walk, been there, he has done that. Still to come, are you a fan of snow? We talk about the benefits of snow, flake by frosted flake. Charlie Baglin in. Stay with us on Kentucky Afield Radio. Signs of life in the dead of winter. Next on Kentucky Afield Radio. The dead of winter. It's called that for good reasons. There's not a flower abloom, and not a bee nor a lawnmower abuzz. A time of year when lush life can be literally snowed under. While sleet, ice, and freezing rain may be our adversaries, most of us will welcome snow. It's the raw material for snow skiing, sled riding, snowballs, snowmen, and not to mention there's pure beauty in that pure white. Compared to summer, the snowy season may be cold and lifeless, but to wildlife and wild plants, the dead of winter is anything but.
The countryside is far from dead in the middle of the wintertime, as all these tracks that we see show us.
That's Roy Grimes. We caught up with Roy one snowy, windy day.
Those are deer tracks right there in front of us, all around this line of trees. It's interesting for landowners in the wintertime. They can actually go out and see what kinds and get an idea, the numbers of animals that live on their farm.
Some animals evolved to live in snow. Snowshoe hares, polar bears. But so far south in Kentucky, creature adaptations are less obvious.
The little shrew, and they're really small, they're among nature's smallest mammals. They actually make tunnels under the snow. It's called a subnivean environment. And they'll actually live under the snow, and they can move freely without worrying about a hawk or an owl or a coyote catching them because they can't be seen. That's why sometimes you'll see a coyote or a fox with its head tilted towards the snow, and they're listening. And when they hear it, then they'll try to pounce on it.
Our mental picture of winter always includes snow. And according to weekend gardener Janine Wishy, snowfall is no reason
to worry about plants.
It actually helps them. The snow has an insulating effect. Also, the snow is particularly important when we do have really, really cold temperatures. The snow on the ground will insulate the crowns of plants and the roots. Plus, as the snow melts, it provides moisture.
For plants to bear fruits, acorns, and otherwise blossom in spring, they need this cold, dormant period.
I remember growing up when we would have lots of snow, and we would be inclined to go out there with the broom and knock it off the plants, and my dad was like, "Oh, no, don't do that." Unless you see where plants are beginning to break under that stress, then you may want to gently brush snow off.
If you have landscaped your yard for beauty and to attract wildlife, there's a danger we tend to overlook.
There's different types of de-icing things that people use. The rock salt, which is sodium chloride, that's the worst one. It's going to damage plant tissues, and because it persists in the environment for quite a while, you may not even see the effects of that on your plants until June. If you do, in fact, use these on your walkways, wash it away.
One reason for such an array of outdoor beauty in Kentucky is because our state enjoys 4 full seasons: spring wildflowers, summer sun, fall foliage, and snow.
Snow around here comes in bunches. We'll go a couple years where we will see hardly any snow. But then you get a couple of years where you get 25, 30, 40 inches of snow, and so it averages back toward the middle. It's kind of a season of extremes.
Meteorologist Bill Meck with WLEX-TV in Lexington.
15 to 20 inches of snow on average, depending on your exact location. A little bit less in western Kentucky, a little bit more in eastern Kentucky. The high mountains, it's a lot more.
If after the first flurry you're the first in line for spring, some perspective may be in order. Our neighbors to the north can get twice to several times our average annual snowfall. 40 inches in Detroit, 80 plus in Boston.
The big events stand out in your mind, the big snows, but we're fairly far south here. Yes, we do get big snows. Yes, occasionally do even hang around for a while. But our latitude does not allow us to get big, classic Norman Rockwell winters. They are the exception rather than the rule.
Winter snow is like nature's own big bottle of whiteout. It covers what may otherwise be a dull, drab, but certainly not lifeless time of year. We realize as we watch animals and plants adjust and adapt, and as we watch our kids who would rather wake up to snowflakes than cornflakes, that there are things about this cold and dreary season that always receive our warm embrace.
Charlie Baglin back on Kentucky Afield Radio. Just a few minutes left on the show that talks about staying warm in winter. What goes for us also goes for our pets. With us in the studio is Dr. Iga Stasiak, the Kentucky State Wildlife Veterinarian who hails from Canada. So welcome.
It's nice to be here.
Cold weather, we have to talk about pets, and you're being a wildlife veterinarian. What precautions should we take this winter?
Wildlife is very well acclimatized to the cold. Species that, evolved in these types of climates, they're able to deal with it. But our pets, they're not evolved to handle the cold in a lot of circumstances. When I was working in private practice, we'd see a lot of cases of frostbite, animals that are hypothermic, kept outside too long, and sometimes the owners just weren't aware and didn't realize that they needed, extra precautions.
So just because an animal is covered with fur doesn't really mean they're invincible.
Yeah, that's right, and it really does depend on the type of dog or cat that you have. Some animals that have heavy fur coats or a lot of fat on them, they're able to handle the cold a lot better than some dogs that are really thin or smaller dogs that just don't have the body fat.
Is it okay to put a coat or a sweater on an animal, or is that something just for looks?
Some people do it for aesthetic reasons, but, it really is something that can help a lot. Often you can tell if your pet's cold, you're outside, the dog starts shivering. That's usually a good sign that they need to come back in.
If going in isn't really an option, they need a place to go to get out of the elements.
So you always want to provide them with some type of shelter, especially shelter from the elements, so from rain and snow and the wind. Something with a roof over their head, some walls to shield them from the wind, and some good insulation material. So this could be, it could be a wooden shed, it could be a small box, it could be a styrofoam container, just a little bit bigger than the animal so they can turn around. they can get in and out comfortably. And then usually try to pack it with some straw or some material, shavings material that they can wrap themselves around and shield themselves from the elements.
What about the diet of a dog or cat? Is there something they need to be eating more of?
Well, their metabolic demands are going to increase with the cold, so they're going to burn energy just trying to stay warm. So you are going to need to feed them substantially more in the wintertime if you're keeping them outdoors. So with the sled dogs up north, where I was from in Northwest Territories, they would get fed a great deal and very fatty, a lot of fish and water. Make sure that the water doesn't freeze. They always need to stay hydrated, make sure they have water to drink. So just make sure you check the water regularly, make sure that it's not freezing up on them.
All right. Dr. Stasiak, thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Be a responsible pet owner, and you will both be warm in the process. This is Charlie Baglin inviting you to join us in a week, and we will go inside outdoors again on Kentucky Afield Radio.